go to any of the evening meetings. I didn't provide my comments. I stopped by at the Maurice's storefront during the day. They weren't really set up to take oral comments, though I chatted for about 20 minutes with one of the gentlemen from Studio Cascade there, and I put some stickers up. They had a nice series of displays with different themes of economic development and future development of the community. I provided a letter with input, which is basically the same kind of input we've been discussing here for years on things to do to improve the city over the next 20 years, some shorter term, some longer term. I did make the point, both to Scott Johns, who was there from the planning department, and also from the folks in Studio Cascade. The important thing is to make sure that this effort does not, in a relatively short time, end up just shelved away somewhere. I think responsibility will have to us as citizens voters to stay on top of this and stay with our city council members, current and after the next election, and push them and tell them this vision is something we really want to see converted into action, because the folks from Studio Cascade can do their work, but there isn't the political will and the public groundswell of opinion to make these things happen. Some of these things are not easy. I mean, if you want to cut through some of the regulatory red tape to see activity on Edis Hook, it requires a concentrated focus from the city over many years to deal with DNR and to deal with Fish and Wildlife with the Corps of Engineers. And maybe it can be done, maybe it can't, but it certainly will not be done if you don't start. So if there are things that are important to us, we need to keep on top of the city over many years to provide the continuity to make that happen. One thing that I said to Nathan West, I'll segue into the PA Forward Committee meeting I attended last week, is people sometimes perhaps unfairly fault the city for not doing anything with public input. We had one of those sessions at the Red Line, I don't know, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. Again, we had a facilitator from out of town, we had a big whiteboard, hundreds of ideas were written on it, and then people said, well, what happened with this? And it just gets shelved away, gets put in a box, put away on the shelf. Nathan said, well, that's not actually so. We do look back at these things and said, well, come out and tell people about it. In fact, why don't you, as part of your report on this meeting, put in historical context. Look at the last meeting from whenever that was, 2010 or whenever the last meeting was. Give us a summary of what the suggestions were then. Tell us what the city did with those, how those were incorporated into city priorities. Let's look at which are the same, which things have changed, how they've been addressed, and that way people get a feeling that their input doesn't go into a vacuum, but actually is used on a continuing basis. And we said that's a good idea. We probably don't do enough to go out and tell people what we're doing with public input. Other things from the PA Forward Committee meeting, we did get a report from one of the folks from Studio Cascade, who's the facilitator for this. He gave a little slide presentation about all the ways they're trying to collect input from the public about this. There was discussion about this year's cruise calendar. We're getting 3 to 4 times as many visits from the small cruise ship this year than we got last year. They obviously like it here. They come here as often as they can, more than to Port Townsend. We are getting probably a couple of visits from big cruise ships. One thing that we may want to take on board and think about, and perhaps also talk to the Port Commission about, quite understandably in the past, the port staff has not seen the crew business as a really high priority because it's not a high revenue item for the port and it ties up one of the piers for the ships to tie up. So from what I heard anecdotally is sometimes cruise ships may call and say, well, can we come to Port Anderson on this date? And they're told, well, no, it's not available. And I don't think there's been a real public groundswell of opinion to tell the port that it is important for more than just the port's marine business. It's important to the economic development of the town, and we need to make it a higher priority, I believe. I think we need to think and talk about perhaps what capital improvements can be made to the place where the cruise ship ties up to make it aesthetically more attractive for passengers and also logistically easier for them to get off and on and to get into the city. And I think these are all things that in the past were not squarely within the port's focus, and if we decide they should be, perhaps we can approach the port commissioners so they can send directives down to the staff as to where the proper priority of that is. And I see one of the port commissioners is here. Right now I'm just speaking without having discussed this as a group. I want to throw this out, though, for future government affairs discussion and action here, potentially. Finally, we had an excellent presentation from Steve Behrman, who talked about what he was doing and what his company is doing, which fits squarely into one of the items that I had in my suggestion for the city, which is that we use our beautiful location and our internet access to attract businesses here from people who can basically work anywhere they want as long as they have access to the internet, and who can bring well-paid jobs here and who can bring work here that brings money from outside of the county into this county from the value added that they create. And I think what Steve is doing and is trying to do falls squarely into that, and I think it needs to be encouraged.
Thank you. Did anybody else go to any of the comprehensive plan meetings and like to mention them? George?
This is related.
You said you weren't going to say anything today. No, go ahead.
April Fools. Just to show everyone how this trickle-down stuff works, the American Spirit Line, which is the company that operates the cruise ship that comes in 25 times a year, has announced it is going to build a new cruise ship. This is not a small ticket item. It'll be in the 125 to 150 passenger range, which is up about 25 to 50% from the existing one. And I think we, in a small part, help them with that decision.
That's good.
Anybody else? Go, Jack.
Kai, question. In the PA forward, did anything come up in regards to phase 3 of the waterfront development? Did any discussion from any?
Not in this meeting, no. This
Okay.
meeting, for the most part, was the presentation of Studio Cascade and then discussion of that project as a follow-up with the brief discussion of the cruises and Steve Behrman's presentation. We didn't talk about phase 3.
During this process here that went on in the comprehensive plan, both Terry and myself attended, I got to 3 of the presentations, had long discussions with both Studio One, Nathan, and others in there as to where, what we really need to do on the waterfront here. Probably at some point here, we need to bring this organization in through you as our representative on this PA forward to start really zeroing in on that waterfront.
That's a good point. The other thing I forgot to say is that the opportunity to give public input on the comprehensive plan was not over with the Studio Cascade blitz last week. This is a process that's going on through April and even May. So for individuals to weigh in, or PABA if you should choose to weigh in with a set of comments or a vision for the city 20 years from now, we still have time to do that if we would like to do it, either individually or as an organization.
Edna, you had your hand up.
You and I have a meeting this week. There is that next week on the parking lot in the downtown.
The Faro, yes. There's a meeting on Thursday at the Faro, which will be at their expansion plan and what's going to happen with the parking lot there.
And that's what, 10 o'clock in the morning?
I thought it was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't remember my calendar.
Would you tell me where I'm supposed to be? And before you all decide to make a decision on cruise ships coming to town, you might talk to some of us that have worked the cruise ships, and you might find out that the economic benefit is in the synergy, not in the dollars that it brings to the community. They've spent their money on the cruise ships, and if you really want to know about it, talk to a city like Ketchikan, Alaska, and what the cruise ships have or have not done for their waterfront. You know, it's theirs. I always call them gypsy dollars, because they come into town, but they've already bought their ticket for all their meals, so they don't eat in our restaurant. They get on buses and go to maybe Hurricane Ridge or Fort Townsend. They get on the ferry and go, maybe if the time allows it. As the Chamber of Commerce, we've done big, huge things when they come in town. I've hung hundreds of balloons. I stood on that cold waterfront in tents with merchandise and stuff. And frankly, their agenda on a cruise ship is pretty well planned. So you need to do some really big research before, as a group, we hop out and say, boy, we want cruise ships here. And I will go as far to say that the American cruise ship lines that are in town right now, that have been coming for years, are wonderful people, but they already have spent their money on that boat.
Yeah.
So there.
Buy a lot of drugs at Safeway and Jim Farm.
They do?
Jim,
They do?
They absolutely.
Jim, I was not going to say that. I was not going to go there. As a matter of fact, I was on the dock the morning of 9/11, and we had a little cruise ship here, and we hauled those folks all to churches because they all thought it was World War II resistant. So, you know, I have a couple experiences with the cruise ships, so we might want Bill Feely's driven buses for the cruise ship. Hey, we have a lot of history with cruise ships.
I'm going to quickly read the minutes from last week, and then we'll go into some more announcement. Meeting was called to order at 7:30 a.m. Betsy Reed Schultz.
The things in the paper about Port Angeles lately. And here, I'll give our arriving member. Just want to let everybody know that in a couple weekends, my favorite holiday of the year, May Day, is here. My sister of 8, for 18 years I've lived out here, she's never come and visited. She's coming and visiting because the mortgage is being burned. So, for those of you who've been to a corn roast, it's a mini corn roast, right? The same issue on flying in bratwurst and natural casings, i.e. that means sheep intestines, from a wonderful place in Wisconsin, along with all sorts of cheeses. If you've never had 5 and 7 and 11-year-old cheese, pretty interesting. The sugar starts to crystallize as it gets aged. The infamous Pat Neal will be grilling up oysters, a little oyster bar. You put on whatever you want. He'll grill them up. Lots of food, lots of good times. So please, you know the deal. You're required to bring somebody and a good attitude and come Sunday, May 1st, to a mortgage burning party. Woo! I'm debt free! That's in all debts. No debts.
Are there any other announcements? Any other announcements before Connie, sorry. Turn the program over to Mary. Okay.
Is there anyone here who has not heard about Waterfront Days?
This weekend.
Okay, great, okay, and you did mention it. This morning, it is this Sunday from noon to 4. The Port Angeles Yacht Club and the Port Angeles are sponsoring this. We're working with the downtown stores too. We're going to be running a shuttle around our part, the port part of the downtown. Platypus will be open for tours as well as Westport, and there will be exhibits and demos at the new West End Park. There'll be a kayak festival. So please come down. Hopefully the weather will be as good as it was yesterday. And we want to have a good turnout and of course support our local stores. And hopefully everyone has noticed the new log ship down at the port. It is the MV Alaska. They're on their maiden voyage, and they are calling Port Angeles their port of call. So this is very exciting for us, and if anyone has specific questions about the vessel, Mike and Emma was here, and I'm sure can provide all the details. She is 616 feet in length, really up to date. It's a really nice modern vessel, and we're looking forward to seeing her come in and out of the port many times. And not only does a vessel like that provide very good income to the port, but it is supporting a lot of jobs in our community. So, and of course, we're still filling that hole down there, the Cape Fly site. And we'll get started back on that in just a couple of weeks and get that filled. And we are working with a consultant to talk to stakeholders, tenants, to see how much they are interested in expanding onto that site before we look for out-of-town business to come in and develop on it. We're moving slowly along on a new airline. We're one day closer than we were yesterday, and we're also one day closer to taking care of the trees at the airport than we were yesterday. So hopefully we will have news on that in the very near future. That's about it with the report that I can report, but the County Planning Commission has a regular meeting tomorrow night. We're going to be going over 6-month use assessment zoning changes. We're also going to be talking about shoreline master plan updates still. We're talking about channel migration zones. That is an important thing in this community, especially out in the West End. But the buffers and setbacks that are in the shoreline master plan are still being looked at to move them even farther away from the streams per Department of Ecology. So even though this is our plan, it's Department of Ecology who's working behind the scenes to make sure that we keep everything in the range that they want.
Connie, and you said you're one day closer to the airline. Does that mean you're relatively close?
Yes. Very close. Very close. hopefully we'll have an announcement really shortly.
Where are we with Clallam? Their idea that they would like to do.
We are working with Platypus on their lease. Okay, so
Just stand by.
Diplomatic.
stand by, we're working on that very hard behind the scenes. The other thing, with the shoreline master plan, it would be really good to get public out to go to the planning commission. It's Wednesday, tomorrow night at 6:30 at the courthouse. The other thing that we're talking about is the critical areas ordinance that has to do with buffer setbacks from wetlands. And we're looking at three different options, really. And it's quite a bit bigger than what was proposed in the shoreline master plan for ecology. And the critical areas are set back away from the shoreline. So we're not talking about just areas along the rivers and the state waters, the freshwater and shorelines. So this is a bigger deal. We're looking at three different options. One having a really large buffer area around wetlands, having a consultant come in to designate, this is option number 2, designate the boundaries of a wetland, and then have specific setbacks based on the amount of land that is disturbed. And the third option, which is the one that ecology favors, is a setback based on habitat review. So having a consultant come in and look at all the habitat within the wetland area, and then scoring that habitat with the wetland, and then basing a setback on that. So if anybody has any input that they would like to provide, please come to the meeting and provide that in public comment.
Thank you. Did anyone ever tell you you'd make a great diplomat? Hi, you had another?
Yeah, just a comment on that, and then an announcement. For those who may not be aware, we think that shorelines are just along the shore. Shorelines are along all our rivers, and the shoreline gets extended if there is a wetland that is deemed to be close to the river. So you could be 1,000 feet away from Morse Creek, 5 miles away from the shore, and you could still be your property could still be subject to the shoreline master plan. So it is not, if you don't live on the coast, it doesn't mean that it will not affect you. It is definitely worth paying attention to, because you might suddenly find yourself with setbacks on your property that make it much less usable than it is today, or that you would like it to be. An announcement: a week from today, on the 26th, at the Paradise Restaurant in Squim, Chris Vance, the Republican candidate for Senate, who is running against Patty Murray, will be speaking at a dinner meeting at 5:30, I believe it is. You can go to the Clallam Republican website and RSVP for it. There will be limited attendance based on the capacity of the Paradise Restaurant, so if you'd like to attend, go to the website, Clallam Republicans, and I think you can also pick out the meal that you'd like to consume if you want to eat, if you want to hear Chris Vance speak.
Okay, any other question? Any other? I'm going to turn the meeting over to Harry Bell, Chairman of our Governmental Affairs Committee. Harry, it's all yours.
And so Connie,
Stand up here.
Connie did such a good job, I have nothing to report.
Wow, are we lucky?
I will be attending the Wednesday night meeting of the Planning Commission tomorrow. I could recall that we spent a lot of time on the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Shoreline Master Plan. And so as that works its way through the system, we need to pay attention on how well they listen to our comments and so I'll be going tomorrow, but don't underestimate the Shoreline Master Plan or the Critical Areas Ordinance. A really big deal relative to land use. So if someone has a burning desire, I can use some help there.
Are you going to introduce our guest speaker?
Harry,
Stand up, stand up. A lot of people can't hear. Oh, Angela's going to. Oh, we've missed you for a couple of weeks. Is it a beautiful day in Port Angeles?
It is, ladies and gentlemen, members and numerous guests. Good morning and welcome to another beautiful day in Port Angeles. And by the way, get outside today. It's going to be August and April. But you know what would really be beautiful? Now imagine this as a business association. Timber is being cut Jim, wouldn't you love that? Timber is being cut at the allowable footage. Taxes are rolling in. X-Men are so busy X-Men can barely make it to a meeting. Mills are opening up. Truck drivers are driving, mechanics are fixing vehicles. Employment is taking an upward tick. We have some problems here. We have a thing called arrearage, and our lumber industry, timber industry is suffering. We also have a lot of our timber regulations run by the state. We have a Natural Resources Board that we're very fortunate, incredibly fortunate, to have one of our county commissioners sit on that board, and he is an international expert on this subject. 3 years in New Zealand, 2 years in Australia, 27 years working for Rainier. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our county commissioner, Bill Peach. Bill.
That was pretty rousing. Thank you very much. And thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you. What I'd like to do with the time that you've given me is to spend about half of that. Thank you. Spend about half of my time with some information I would like to share with you about the Board of Natural Resources, and the other half answering questions. Let me share that I have some numbers. If you love numbers, I can point you in the direction of numbers. One number, if you'll listen to the presentation, that'll be meaningful to you, is how many murrelets does it take to build a school? Let me begin by sharing the composition of the Board of Natural Resources. The Board of Natural Resources is fundamentally the board of directors for the DMR, Department of Natural Resources. And the people that are on that board include Peter Goldmark, Commissioner of Public Lands, J.T. Austin, designee for Governor Jay Inslee, Ron Middlehammer, he's the Dean, College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resources Sciences, Washington State University, Randy Dorn, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom DeLuca, Director, School of Environmental and Forest Sciences, University of Washington, and myself. And I'm very proud to tell you that I succeed Jim McIntyre, who served on that same exact position. It's a position that's actually voted on of the 21 counties that have timber in the state of Washington. They decide through voting who shall represent the timber counties. And I was fortunate enough, thanks very much for a couple of kind words, to be elected on this board. The thoughts that I'd like to share with you first are what are some of the things that the board is currently doing, and then I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about what you can do. One of the things that the board is working on right now is the sustained yield calculation. That's really the amount of timber that can be harvested every year for the next 10 years. Now that process has been slowed. It should have been completed in 2014. It's a process that occurs every 10 years, and it's been slowed because there are other issues to consider that haven't been resolved. You see, if you're going to calculate how many carrots you can take out of that garden of yours, one at a time, in perpetuity, you have to know how many carrots are harvestable. And so that's the issue right now. The Board of Natural Resources is considering the classic information, how old are the carrots. They're also considering which ones are available. And issues that affect which ones are available include new proposed regulation for the marbled murrelet. Another issue that, well, let me just touch on that. With regard to the marbled murrelet, there are 6 options that are being considered that range from no change to the current 630,000 acres that's currently being managed only for endangered species to include murrelet, to increasing it to the largest proposal at 111,000 acres. Now, at $10,000 an acre, it's $1 billion. And I can show you the calculations, but the estimate of the number of murrelets that we're managing on DNR property here in Washington State is about 1,000. It's actually a little bit less than that. That means $1.1 billion to take care of 1,000 birds. Do the math. $1 million a bird. Another issue the board's working with is referred to as arrearage, and that's the amount of timber that was authorized to cut compared to what was actually cut. And I've actually done some calculations to answer the question, what's that mean to Clallam County? Why should we be at all concerned about this? This is a calculation, anybody that wants, it's actually on the county's website. Phil Kitchell included this particular report in the work he posted, I think in November or December. Yeah, stop by if you want a copy of it, I'm happy to share it with you. During the period 2005 to 2014, Clallam County received $58 million from the timberlands that are owned by the county. That's some 92,000 acres, just as a pause for you. The state owns just a little more than half of that. Some 52,000 acres were given to the state of Washington. When the state was established in 1854, there was a need for the state to prove they could pay long-term for things such as the Capitol building, prisons, our school system, and specific parcels of land are designated. Whenever there's a harvest on that parcel, that revenue has a specific destination. It has either the prison or it has Olympia, etc. I'm not talking about that 50,000 acres. I'm talking about the 92,000 acres that the county acquired over time because people didn't pay their taxes, property taxes. And when it's harvested, it has a very specific distribution. Well, let's see now. It's identical to how the money is distributed for property tax. It is literally paying the property tax. So I've done some work to answer the question, what does it mean to you in Clallam County? Like I said, between the period 2005 to 2014, $58 million was received. The arrearage, that's the variance between what was authorized and what occurred at $58 million, is $15.4 million. Just kind of give you a quick breakdown on some of where that would go. Fire departments in Clallam County have not been paid $130,000 that's due to them. Hospitals have not been paid $1 million. And schools, all schools in Clallam County have not been paid $4.3 million. I share it with you so that you begin to look at the issue from the perspective of what does it mean to you if that revenue stream doesn't occur. You get to pay for it through your own taxes. And not all of the requests for tax money have been granted. Case in point, look at what's happened with our schools. So this is a personal issue, and it affects every single person in Clallam County. I'm going to switch gears so that I answer the question, what's in it for you? I've got a couple of ideas here to answer the question, what can you do? And then with luck, I'll finish up in about 5 or 6 minutes and we can have a conversation. I'll answer any question you want, I hope. Anyway, first item I have in terms of what can you do. In February of this year, while I was on the Board of Natural Resources, I made a request to DNR staff that is a matter of public record. And that request was, for each of the 6 alternatives being considered for the marbled murrelet protection, remember it ranges in value from $0 to $1 billion. I asked that the financial report that will come out with the environmental impact statement, detailed by county and by junior taxing district, the financial impact of every single one of those options. Now here's why. I started looking at some old numbers that were prepared, this is 20 years ago, when the Habitat Conservation Plan was prepared, about 19, 20 years ago. And I looked in the financial section of the environmental impact statement. And the work that was done said that there's a very negligible impact between not having the HCP and having the HCP. Today, we have 630,000 acres at $10,000 an acre. That's $6 billion. I consider that a pretty decent variance. The reason that I'm trying to have a paper trail on what the impact is to the junior taxing districts, and I'm an advocate. Remember, I'm elected to this to represent the junior taxing districts, is because I can't go back 20 years and look at the work that was done to find out what happened when they made this decision that there would be a negligible impact. If you can find it, please would you share it with me? I can't find it. But what I am sure of is $6 billion is a big variance. And so what I'm quite interested in is transparency. You know, if you want to ask my opinion about whether or not we should take one alternative versus the other, I'm just one of 6 people that are going to vote on the issue. But you have the right to look at those options from the perspective of what does it mean to you? Your library, your hospital, your fire department, and I'll tell you, I can't find that information when I turn the clock back and I go through the files. And I think it's because that was not the approach that was taken. So I'm quite interested in endorsing transparency, and so I ask you, I encourage you to follow up on the request that I had to the DNR staff in February, and they said, Val Blue assured me that could be calculated, and it would be calculated. So I look for it as part of the financial analysis that's presented in the 6 alternatives. In addition, think about the real cost of $1.1 billion to manage 1,000 murrelets. It's not just the $1 million per bird. Think about the jobs, the decreased revenue for schools, hospital, fire department, and other junior taxing districts. Please think about it in terms of dollars to your community. Read. I suggest highly that you have a chance to read the work that's been going on with the Trustline Advisory Committee. It's work that is published. They meet once a month. The work is posted to the website that the county has, and it's really good work. It really and truly has some excellent information that helps you decide. Now here's the good news. It's totally transparent. And here's the bad news. There's a lot of it. So if you do want to answer questions like how did DNR spend money on their staffing, they have a couple of conversations about arrearage. How did arrearage happen? And a lot of conversations that are associated with the timberlands. It's a really, really good source. You can, review the information at your leisure. Another thing that I highly recommend is vote. 4 of the 6 commissioners are elected positions. And one of those positions, the Commissioner of Public Lands, will be on the ballot this year. Just recently, the Commissioner of Public Lands stated that he was not going to run for re-election. You have an opportunity to weigh in on who's going to be the next Commissioner of Public Lands. Another option I give you is please call me. My cell is 640-8303, and I make the run from Beaver to Port Angeles, usually about 8 o'clock. That's an hour's worth of time, except for a little bit of time when I lose out going around the lake for cell reception. But I do a lot of business on the phone as I'm making that commute. Feel free to give me a call and meet with me. I'm a county commissioner that believes in transparency, so actually staff has access to my calendar. All you have to do is call 417-2233 and say, I want to meet with Bill. That's it. She boots up my calendar and she'll pick a time that, you decide what works for you. She knows what my schedule has. We'll meet. I don't care if we want to meet, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning or 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'm sincere when I say that I'm open to the meetings. I've had meetings with a number of people that are in industry, citizens. I've had meetings with people that represent the timber industry from the manufacturing perspective. I've had meetings with Audubon. I've got one coming up with the Washington Environmental Council. I'm very, very, very interested in listening to what you, the voter, have to say. So the last thing that I really, really highly recommend that you consider is to attend the Board of Natural Resources meetings. Now, this is a real commitment on your part. You get a grand total of 3 minutes. You get to drive for, 3 hours to do 3 minutes, one way. You do get to go shopping when you're in the big city, but I can tell you at the very last meeting, there was a timber sale that was in Pacific County, and DNR had done a lot of work to prepare that sale for offer. One of the responsibilities the Board of Natural Resources has is to approve the timber sales that are going to be offered each month. At that meeting, we had a county commissioner from Pacific County speak in favor of what that sale really and truly means to their bottom line. We're doing a lot better than most counties, a lot better. And that was an important cash flow to Pacific County. There was also a presentation that was done by the Timberland Regional Library System. They are a junior taxing district, a beneficiary of the revenue stream from that timber sale. And those kinds of presentations, even though it's 3 minutes, resonate. They truly resonate. That particular sale went through the system with a 6-0 approval. And I got to believe that a lot of it has to do with people that want to engage, people that want to attend these meetings. If you don't want to attend, then send your letter, or ask PABA to send your letter to represent you. So I tried to keep it to 15 minutes. I got close. Mostly I'm interested in being able to answer any kind of questions that you might have, and I'll turn it forward to you.
Questions? Who wants to be first? Hi? You can stand up here to answer them.
Are these decisions subject to a cost-benefit analysis or net benefits analysis or least burdensome alternative requirements, such as, for example, at least in theory, Department of Ecology decisions are when they engage in activities that protect species?
You're referring to the decisions that...
Decisions to set aside habitat for the marbled burlet, for example. Do those kinds of analyses have to be performed?
They are supposed to be performed as part of the environmental impact statement in the financial analysis. Now, I'll tell you what was done 20 years ago, an analysis that resulted in a $6 billion variance. So I highly encourage participation. Like I say, I made a formal request. I want to see the detailed by county. It is only a part of what they do. There's a lot of other biologic information that's put together. I really think that there's a need for the social impact. It's not just the trees. It's not just the MBF. The financial benefit, the economic benefit to our community is the multiplier associated with that. How many people have a job? How many of those people are paying taxes and on, as opposed to the alternative? We've got a hell of a heroin problem in this county. And that's what happens when people give up, when they lose hope. And so I believe that, personally, I'd like to see a lot more strength in that financial analysis. Because I think that they're allowed to present the information they would like to present. Our opportunity is to say, good start. I'd like to see some strength here.
My experience with ecology, and of course ecology is not DNR, is that these analyses bear very close watching. Ecology has exempted itself by the internal rule from the state law requirement of doing a maximum net benefit analysis, which says that every rule has to have a net benefit to the population that's affected by it. This is something we're challenging in court. We don't believe that ecology can, by internal rule, override a state statute. They just decide if we don't feel like doing it, we don't have to do it. The cost benefit analysis and the unlimited water rule, they got their own economist to write a report that said the costs exceed the benefits, therefore the rule is unlawful. They booted him off the team. They got another economist who wrote a report with the result they wanted. So these things bear close watching because they treat it as just a box that has to be checked, and they keep trying until the box is checked. But when you dig into it, you sometimes find fairly interesting information that can be used to attack the process and the result when you get all the details that are behind it.
And use your opportunity to share your opinion to the Board of Natural Resources directly. I did. I'm on record in February, raising my hand to the fact
One really needs to read these studies carefully, and one needs to hold their feet to the fire. And ideally, in what we'd like to do, which we have been successful, is to get some kind of scientific peer review of the scientific aspects of the scientific reports or by an independent economist of the cost-benefits analysis to see whether they were playing fast and loose with the numbers and with the statistical rules, which they often do.
So get away with it if we sleep through it. And I know you're not going to.
Any other questions? And
Okay, so we're in the last 5 years, 2 to 4 mills have closed on the peninsula, correct?
Correct.
How directly, and I remember at some point jobs that was just in the mills, but I can't recall right now. You're going to, because you're that, one of the two of you will toss that number out because you're really good at that. But going forward with that, how directly did this variance that you call it and the lack of timber affect those 4 mills?
I built a plant in New Zealand, medium density fiberboard plant, cost $100 million, came in on time and on budget. I'll never forget presenting to executive management, that's a lot of money. So the president of the company shows up with his entourage, and I've got all of these topics that we're going to be speaking to. And he looks at it, and about number 8 was fiber supply. And immediately said, nope, we take that to the top of the list, and we discuss that first. Unfortunately, some person that was used to be number 1 on the list was, why? And I'll never forget his response. You know what the definition of a mill is without lumber? Or, excuse me, without logs? Rust. And I do believe that that was a significant issue that influenced how those mills were able to continue. In the case of the Interfor mill, I honestly do believe they were faced with the issue of decreasing their cost of production to be competitive. How do you use capital on equipment holding the same number of people to increase your production, which lowers your cost of production? When you look out there at the forecasts and you say, there's way too much uncertainty here. As a merchant banker, I don't blame Interfor for a second. Looking at that situation and saying, I don't think this is a good environment to invest capital. I really don't. So I do believe that it was a significant contributor. And you know, my concern right now is that that trend could continue.
Andrew?
Yes, Bill, since the state oversees, sets the rules on harvest, and we're in arrearage, which they're holding these lands in trust, and you've outlined that there seems to be real damage. What, if any, recourse do you have in the courts? Do we as a county, the counties of the state have?
I think it's a possibility, a couple of cases that I'll bring to your attention that you might want to follow. Number 1, the state of Oregon, Lynn County, sued the state for $1.4 billion. Same issue, not harvesting the timber that was allotted to them. That was filed, oh gosh, a few months ago. It's worth following. Clearly, the McCleary decision is a case worth following. The whole case is, what are you doing to supply proper classroom size, proper classroom instruction, teacher-student ratio, and that one is most certainly worth following. State legislature is going to pick that issue up next year, and we'll see what they come up with. But of all of the solutions, such as let's get rid of Iman's 1% cap on real estate, on property tax, or let's have a brand new tax. Maybe let's have the carbon tax morphed into let's take care of schools. I hope no one forgets about the fact that of the $6 billion that's been committed for other than timber harvest, 85% of it would go to schools. I hope no one forgets about that, because that is a very, very genuine solution, at least some portion of that. So I would watch during the next year for the solutions that your legislature proposes and weigh in. Absolutely weigh in. Stop by. Talk to them.
Stephanie, you had a question?
Well, a couple things. Bill, as you know, Clallam Public Eye has been videotaping Land Trust. They're very long, as he's mentioned. Is there any key people that they can move to and listen, that you would suggest they listen to their points that they've made that's on that committee?
Definitely, I would look at Kyle Bloom. There's the Commissioner of Public Lands, Lenny Young, and Kyle Bloom. The fellow's right up there in terms of senior management. He presents good information. He has staff that prepare it to make sure the information is correct. In March, there was a very, very interesting philosophical conversation. Two lawyers on each side of the issue spoke. It's in the notes. One school of thought is that in 1854, when the state was established and there were specific lands designated, and then following during the Depression when specific lands were identified because of property tax that weren't paid, there's a specific destination for all of those revenues. That's one school of thought. If you want to read about something that's been prevalent for quite a number of years, the Skamania case is a body of law that went to the state Supreme Court that basically says there exists a fiduciary responsibility and a discussion. There's another school of thought that says that, no, forget about all of those rules, the implementation of statehood. Everybody in the state of Washington is a beneficiary, not just the schools. And therefore, there should be a conversation about maybe the use of forest that we've been thinking about to generate dollars is the wrong use of forest. It should be for other non-revenue generating activity. That philosophical conversation is in play right now. And I would, if you get a chance, it's in the March Timberland Advisory Committee meeting notes. Really, really good presentations were made on both sides of the issues. I'd highly recommend you look at it. This is a square one issue. You see, the issue of arrearage disappears. So does the calculation of the sustained yield. Okay, by the way, so does the fiduciary responsibility to the beneficiaries, including the schools, if this argument prevails. And I do not support it, but it's worth watching.
Bob, you have a question?
As I understand it, as Phil explained here a while back, the DNR gets a certain percentage of the money to manage that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they're, last I heard, they're increasing that percentage because they're not making enough money on what they're harvesting.
Is that right? On the lands that they manage for the county.
So they want a little more money, but they're harvesting less.
Correct, but they are currently receiving 25% by statute. I think they can move to 33. And on the lands that are being managed for other than the county, the original state transfer from the federal government is currently 32%. And here's the paradox: they're not making enough money, so they want to increase their...
Exactly. And as a businessman, I own 136 storage units, and they're 100% full under my management. Jack comes to me and he says, Bob, I can do the job. You can go ahead and retire if you give me 10%. So he steps in.
15.
He, 15. He steps in, he manages it, and a year's time, he comes to me and says, Bob, it's not 100% full anymore, it's only 80% full, because this and this happened.
Right.
Consequently, instead of 15, I'd like 20. That doesn't make any sense to me. My answer to him is a Trump answer, you're fired. That's it. You're fired.
Yep.
How do we put pressure on the DNR? How do we cut that whatever percent it is the other way when they do not make it? In other words, give them some real incentive to try and harvest that timber. Cut their percentage if they don't match certain goals. That would be, I think, the quickest approach. I have seen this whole act before, where these folks in charge drag these things out for years. Fine, we're going to set a committee up here, we're going to meet on this, and sorry, our study isn't going to be ready this year, it'll be ready 2 years from now. And that's exactly what's going on right now. I think we need to approach it a little more directly.
And you know, that's the kind of comment I think is extremely important at the Board of Natural Resources meetings. The irony is, without the additional harvest, there's not the money for the staff to make the progress. It's terrible. I'm sorry, it's almost our time.
Okay, I don't know if there's anything to extend the
Yeah,
meeting, or we'll just...
More.
Yeah, you did.
So, Madam Chairman, due to the fact that there's questions, I move that we extend the meeting.
Second.
Second.
Want a second? Okay, all those in favor?
Yeah.
You have to answer the question.
I shall indeed. Kai's right. You know, the fact of the matter is, if we remain silent when documents that are presented do not have a proper analysis of financial and social issues, we deserve what we get. But I believe that if we will stand up and say, as an example, the Olympic region has a variance over the last 2005 to 2014 that averaged around 22%. Well, I wonder what that 22% is compared to their requests for funding that were cut 20%. There's a direct correlation. You know, they requested what was necessary to get 100% of their objectives and didn't receive that level of funding. So I believe that one of the outcomes of this entire process, the Trust Land Advisory Committee, by going to the Board of Natural Resources, is to say, I have a vested interest. I'm a member of Clallam County, and as a junior taxing district beneficiary, if you go to the library or if you receive help from the hospital or fire department, you are a beneficiary. I want to see the funding that is being proposed out of the local region supported, and if it's not, please explain why. But don't come to me with an additional request for funding if you won't even give the funds necessary for them to run their budget.
You said there were six options on the table. Where are you in the six?
I'm actually, I like to do nothing. Actually, I like the way.
Wait a second.
I'm actually very interested in looking at the analysis that is occurring, because a couple of things are happening. One is there used to be 5. The environmental community thought, well, let's combine 2. That created a more rigorous 6th alternative. My real concern is look at the options and think about Clallam County of the 111,000 acres. And I wish I had this explicit number for you, but I can tell you that a lot of the land in western Clallam County that's near Clallam Bay, there's the Clallam Bay block of timber, is going to be set aside. It'll be off limits. So a high percentage of that 111,000 acres is going to come from Clallam County. Another reason, Stephanie, I'm waiting is that there's some work that's being done by a professor, I apologize for not recalling his last name, University of Wisconsin. He's doing population analysis, and what he's looking at is, for each one of the options, which option has the greatest benefit to a change in the population. And so far, he's only looked at 3. At last month's meeting, he had completed the rest. It's forthcoming, but here's what his work says. There's a negligible impact. regardless of which option you select. And you don't stand back from it. 90% of this bird's life cycle is spent in the ocean. Okay, they live to be 5 years old. The first 2 years they're out in the ocean. They come back just to nest. Is there anything at all going on in the ocean that would influence their ability to survive? We've heard of El Nino. We've heard of all the arguments that deal with climate change. And you know, this disparaging part of this is that there's a lack of research on what is occurring out there in the ocean. The other thing that I'll share with you is I just have a problem with doing exactly what we did yesterday, i.e. lock up timberland and expecting a different outcome.
Tom Swanson had a question.
It was answered.
Oh, okay.
You know, where's the University of Washington's College of Forest Resources member on the board? Where is the head and thinking in regards to these issues that we're talking about here?
I haven't heard him weigh in on a rearage. One of the things, is Tom DeLuca, you done? Yeah. One of the things I really like about where Tom DeLuca's coming from is he's actually trying to get a project here in Forks area where they look at, sorry, I hope everybody's had their breakfast, the excrement from the murrelet. And the reason is that they eat offshore. And it is the case that some of the chemicals, the isotopes that are associated with that excrement can be traced to just offshore activity. You don't find that in your forest naturally. So it answers the question, if you're picking up on that, aha, there's evidence that the bird was there or it wasn't. And what I like about Tom's work is there's no predisposed outcome. He wants to answer the question, can we use a tool today to answer the question, how heavily populated are these forests? Are they returning? And I think Tom's approach is pretty middle of the road, but he wants to try, he's got an interesting approach, using science to answer the question, how many murrelets are in the forest?
Thank you. Commissioner Peach, I think you've made a really important point that I know my small business clients aren't really clear on. I know Brian works with small businesses, Doc Robinson works with small businesses. Maybe they can weigh in on this too, but I think with all of the environmental proselytizing and the other things that have gone on over the decades, small business owners have lost that connection that you just made of harvest or pay taxes. And I think that's a really important lead for the story today, is that we really need to bring people's focus back to that. I think that could generate a tremendous amount of momentum in restoring sanity to this situation, because the three elements of mind control: first, control information. That information has not been brought back out to the surface, and I think there'd be an enormous support from the small business community across the state to get back to doing what we said we were going to do going back to the mid-1800s, if it was brought back to their dashboard. But I'm not sure they see it that way. Here, my clients think timber is important, but they've lost the direct connection to their pocketbook, I think.
That's why I am objective on the board. I'm learning as I go. I'm fortunate, I'm the only member of the Board of Natural Resources that's ever bought a DNR sale.
Really?
So I understand.
Really?
I have operational experience. And what I also understand is exactly what you're sharing. People don't make that connection.
That's insane.
So, I see the irony that a citizen has to use more of their personal income to care for the kids in the hospitals, etc., and they don't quite recognize that there's an alternative. And so that's why I encourage communication. Is $1 million to care for the bird acceptable? I'll let you decide and call me and tell me how to vote.
Just one quick comment, this was brought up about the marble murrelet at our government council meeting here almost a year ago, and I brought up the point, hey, the lack of timber isn't causing the marble murrelet die off, it's a lack of food. And it was quickly pointed out to me, the marble roulette is just what the environmentalists are using at this time. It's not the spotted owl, marble roulette will be the green slug. That'll be next. So the real solution is a political solution. Overall, we need to get some politicians in there that think more about the people than they do.
Agreed. 4 of the 6 people on this board are elected officials. You've been trying to raise your hand. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
While we're on the Merlet, I've heard that the large percentage of their population is in Alaska, and it's a very small percentage that is on the Olympic Peninsula. Do you have any numbers for that?
We're talking about a guy who got 2 engineering degrees simultaneously. Just happen to have some numbers. We're talking about a total population, and this is from the scientific community. There's a very good report that was finalized last year. Recovery strategy for the marble roulette. Total 356,246 is an estimate of the population at this very minute. Here's how it breaks down for you. 92% are in Alaska. 7% are in British Columbia. 1% is in Washington, Oregon, and California.
1%.
I get to a calculation of 1,000 birds by taking the 1%, splitting it equally between 3 states, and then I look at the number of acres that are suitable for Merlet, regardless of who owns them, and allocate to the DNR from all these calculations, and that's where I come up. My number's closer to 943, but you call it 1,000 birds. Yeah, the issues, there's good solid data on that. I'm happy to share that with anyone. It's not my work. It's good. Actually, you know who started that work? This guy right there.
All right.
Thank you very much.
He did.
Got time for one more quick question, anything?
I think Harry had a question.
Harry?
That was my question.
Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Oh, Connie?
First of all, I want to thank you so much, Bill, for taking on this extra responsibility with making the application to serve on the Board of Natural Resources and for representing us and being our voice. If you would just answer very quickly, very shortly, are we any better off with our federal lands that are in our county?
Slightly. I do believe that the work that Congressman Kilmer's involved in brings people together, and to that end, there's benefit. What I object to is another layer. In a system that has so many layers, nothing happens. Now maybe that group's able to cut through all of that, in which case, great. But they've been working on, I'll just say that adding a layer of bureaucracy to a very heavily bureaucratic process isn't the way to speed things up, but it does get these people to talk to each other. And I understand there's been no blood spilled at any of these meetings.
Come back again, talk to us about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm not quite sure what our program is next week. If you check the website, I'm sure John will have it.